Hello and welcome to another Three Geeks Conversation. I'm Blacksmith, joined by our good friend Mike McGee from Mike McGee TV, and we are here with Marc Bernardin, who is one of my personal podcast heroes. Mm-hmm. Marc is a comic book writer, journalist, TV writer, but so much more for me personally. Just one of my heroes. So Marc, how's it going? How are you doing today?
I'm good, guys. I'm not sure where you are in the world, but it is 72 degrees and sunny. So like I can complain about some shit, but I won't.
Feel free.
I think we got to mid 50s, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
Like the last week and a half or so, I've been really feeling it from my East Coast brethren, and sort of the vestigial nostalgia of like deep snow days.
Yep.
Like would perk up a little bit, and then remembering stepping in slush puddles and brown snow. I was like, you know what? I'm good. Y'all have it.
New Jersey right here. Shoveled myself out last week.
Yep. I haven't owned a shovel in like 13 years.
That's gotta be nice.
It's
oh my
gosh. There's some things I miss about New York, New Jersey. That is not one of them.
Right.
But all right. Marc, you kind of you got on to you're podcasting with Kevin Smith now in the Fat Man Beyond podcast. Mm-hmm. How's that going? How is that journey for you? And this is where I really came to know you. So how's that been for you?
It's been an incredibly both comforting experience and surreal experience and educational experience. Like I wasn't podcasting before Kevin was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And I have made it now my life's motto to whenever Kevin asks me if I want to do something, I just say yes.
Seems to work out.
Yeah, you get to abuse that. Like, hey man, can you hide this gun for me? And it's like, yeah, all right, I guess. I've told you my mission was to say yes. But no, it's been now like 14 years, I think.
Back when it was Fat Man on Batman, I believe.
It was Fat Man on Batman, and then even before that, like my first experience was being a guest on Plus One, the podcast that he does with his wife. And so the world changed in the last 14 years, both, in lots of different like objective reality ways, but also in just like how the nerd world functions, how media functions, how we as people who love stuff and read stuff and watch stuff talk about that stuff has changed in like 13 or 14 years. But it is still the most fun that I have any given week. It is the lightest lift of the things that I have to do, which is like, hey man, all right, I'll look at Deadline and Variety and see if any news is worth talking about. I will copy and paste some shit and then read it to him on the internet. But it is the magic of it, if you could even call it magic, is that it is just two men of a certain age talking as if we just got out of the movie theater and saw a thing and are talking about a thing in the parking lot and do so for like 2 hours.
Right.
Which is my experience with all of my friends and has always been my experience with my friends. Like, we curate our lives to one degree or another. And I've curated it so that the people I spend time with are the people who would like to spend time talking about the dumbest shit for far too long and like unwilling to go home. Like everybody's a stayer. Everybody's like, oh, we just saw that movie. We're going to talk about it in the parking lot until security comes by and asks us what we're doing in the parking lot.
I like that. I like that kind of attitude and approach to it. And I can tell, too, I try to check in on the Fat Man streams every once in a while, and I can absolutely tell like you're putting your journalism kind of angle at work, too, because of the aspect that you really do take a more critical kind of approach to certain things and really analyze some stuff. And I'm not saying Kevin doesn't do that either, but the idea that he's been inside baseball for a while being a filmmaker, he kind of understands what kind of the give and take is in the industry as well, being behind the camera and so forth. But also, he's a mega fan of a lot of things too. And I love that you have this dynamic where you're able to kind of balance each other out very well in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like he's spoken about this before, so I'm not telling tales out of school. But he used to be much more opinionated on the internet, like 15 years ago, when like the USB message boards were alive and popping, and he would just get in there and just shit on stuff. Because he, again, is a nerd, and that is, for one reason or another, part of our DNA. It's
a cornerstone.
Yes. I love this. Ooh, I did not like this at all. But, he got chastised once or twice. He flew a little too close to the sun, and then was like, you know what? There's nothing to be gained for him, like being a negative person on the internet. And I, for a while, was like, well, I'm going to be that guy.
Somebody's got to be that guy.
Somebody's got to be that guy.
I'm absolutely that guy on our podcast. But I recently had a misstep with the 28 years franchise. But
yeah, and I was that guy for 4 or 5 years on the podcast, and then I started working professionally in Hollywood, and then I'm as candid as anybody else. Like I am not going to bite the hand that feeds now that it's exclusively the hand that feeds. And I'd like to think, whether this is true or not, but any criticisms I always had was not based on personal animus towards anything or anyone. It was like, this didn't work for me. Let me explain why it didn't work for me. Rarely would have been like, oh, that movie's shitty, except for like Iron Fist. Iron Fist will always earn the
buddy.
Ooh,
that
is
everybody should be embarrassed of having anything to do with Iron Fist. Even if hey, you worked on it and you didn't make any of those choices, but you still had to own what that ended up being. But everything was hopefully, from I'd like to do this for a living. Why does this work for me? Why does this not work for me? Let's get under the hood and start examining the architecture and the structure and the drivetrain and the power shaft and other automotive terms that I can scramble for. Why is the suspension so bouncy? So that it would help me understand it, and then hopefully help other people, if they wanted to do this, also kind of understand it. Because I didn't go to school for this stuff. I am as self-taught a writer as anybody can possibly be. I do not have any advanced degrees in anything. So the way that I learned was by watching stuff that I loved and then taking it apart and figuring out why it moved me or why it didn't move me. I mean, you learn a lot more from bad things than you do actually from good things. I watched a lot of bad things growing up.
I feel like there's a lot more bad than there is good. Being honest, that's
so much harder to make a good thing than make a bad thing.
Right.
So the numbers are going to yield for you lots of learning opportunities.
But you recently took your first, you directed your first movie. How was that for you? How was the whole process being the guy in charge?
The thing that I realized very quickly is that being the guy in charge more often than not means being the guy who doesn't know very much. I guess that's the benefit of being in charge is then you get to just say I don't know what I'm doing, but you guys know what you're doing. So if you tell me what you think is the right thing to do, we'll probably do it. It was an exercise in humility more than anything else, because I knew what I knew. I knew how to write. I knew what the story was. I knew what the script was. I knew what the characters were doing. And that was the bit that I could own. Was I think this story works. And here's why I think it works. Everything else, I was a neophyte in a land of experts. And so, I cannot tell the DP what lens to choose. I can't tell the lighting crew where to hang a light. I can't tell the sound guy how to mix or work a boom. I can't tell the costume designer how to design a costume. I can't do any of that. So it becomes all right, here's what we're going for. How do you think we get there? And then if you give me 2 or 3 options, I can choose between them. But I'm not going to tell you how to do your job because I can't do your job. I'm not James Cameron, right? James Cameron's, his ego got to be as large as it was because he could do everybody's job on a movie set. And so he could say, hey, man, that ought to be a 65 and not a 70 millimeter lens. Hey, man, that is, I was hoping for a Klieg instead of a spot, lighting wise. He could literally do everybody's job. And so then it's impossible to fuck up on a James Cameron set. He's going to call you on it. I'm way more, I guess, impressionable than that. I was just hey, I can't do it. Tell me what you guys think we should do. Are you happy? Are you happy? Are you happy? We think we got it. Then let's move on. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun because it turns out that making things with your friends is the zenith of things to aim for. Like if you get to play with your friends and then get paid to play with your friends, like they don't tell us that shit in elementary school and high school, that is actually the career you should aim for, is a way to play with your friends for money.
Yeah, like how could they never ever once said that, and yeah, like we're finding out just a little bit later on in years. It's like, oh, I could just be having fun and getting paid for it. That would be cool too, right? Like,
I mean, it's a contact sport, but it's a group sport. And so, like, if we can all just do this together, then maybe the contact won't be so painful if we can all kind of lick our wounds together and have a rap party and have a little too much to drink. But no, it was so much fun. It was so much fun, to the point where like I'm actively looking for ways that I can do it again. Because if you'd asked me on day one after wrapping Splinter, and people did, it's like, hey, so you think we want to do this again? I was like, God, no, I'm exhausted. This was 3 days, 4 days shoot, and I'm wrecked. Like, do this again, more? And then you asked me like a week later. It's like, yeah, I think I do.
Yeah, so you've done your binge. You're on the end of it. You're strung out. You're a little tired, but you get some rest. You get some juice. And you're good to go.
You were bitten. You were bitten.
It is the like, pain is temporary, and our bodies conspire against us to make us forget how bad the pain was. And I know this to be true because there are people with more than one child. Mm-hmm. And like, you remember that pain for real? Yeah. Everybody's an only child because nobody does that shit twice. Except that, like, your body conspires to erase the depth of that pain from you. So that's like 9 kids. Like you just have a problem.
I mean, your body's like, hey man, you survived it. Remember that?
Nobody runs a marathon more than twice if they would remember how much that hurt the first time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And what's this wonderful endorphin rush I'm having right now in response to whatever that was?
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's do that again. I mean, jump out of a plane? Yeah.
There's no way I'm jumping out of a plane.
No,
yeah, that's not
I'm not jumping out of a plane on purpose.
Right.
Like something has to be broken. That's going to make me jump.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, so you mean the plane's working? Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and like everything's fine. Yeah. No, I'm just going to stay right here.
Yeah.
Seems like
That's
a
cool.
better idea.
Take me back down. This was a cute little flight.
I had a question actually with regards to one of your writing endeavors. So Max and I, we actually co-host a Batman podcast together. The man from Jersey and my black friend here. So you and Kevin were very much like an inspiration for us starting off. And one of the things we talked about was Cape Crusader, which you had a writing credit on. And it was the Night Ride, I believe, the Gentleman Ghost episode.
It was indeed.
And both Max and I are big fans of that show and that particular episode, I want to say. And what was kind of your approach of, say, rebuilding the mythos of that? I don't know what tier you would call Gentleman Ghost in the DC pantheon, but what was kind of your approach of saying, okay, well, here's my angle then with Gentleman Ghost into this new angle?
Like it that job was wonderful in so many ways. I had gotten to be friendly with Ed Brubaker over the years, and like he just texted me one day and was like, "Hey man, do you want to write a Batman?" And I said, "Yes, Ed, I would like to write a Batman." What Batman would you like me to write? And, and we talked about. I mean, I knew he was doing the show. That news had already broken, and so we talked about it for a little bit. He's like, "Well, we had a writer's room, but most of the writers could not stay aboard to continue like writing every script of the show. And so they kind of scattered to the winds. And so we're kind of like taking on freelancers to do this. I know Ruck is going to do one. Somebody else is going to do one. Do you want to write one?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And they said, "Well, we had this particular episode, The Gentleman Ghost." And I was like, "Oh, I kind of dig that character. He's incredibly silly, but sure." And And most of our conversations was about who this particular Batman was, right? Like, who's this guy? What does Bruce Timm want to say about Batman now that he couldn't say 15, 20 years ago on the animated series and Justice League and even the Superman show? Like, what's his new take on Batman? And then figuring that out, then it was like, all right, well, here's the story. We wanted to do a story about class and in this particular version of Gotham. We can use Papa Midnight. I was like, dope. That's great. And they gave me like 3 or 4 paragraphs that they had broken in the writer's room of like, here's kind of generally what's going to happen in this show. It's like, we're going to, it's like highway robbery stuff. And who's this guy? And Bruce is going to think that it's, Bruce is confronted with what seems to be the supernatural. But he can't believe that it's a supernatural because that's not the way his mind works, And so it's the old Sherlock Holmes, if I'm going to butcher the saying, but if the improbable can't be believed, then the impossible must be possible, or some shit like that. That is wrong. The internet will tell me that that's wrong. It's coming to my mind right now.
Yeah, but they do that anyway.
Yeah. I'm always wrong on the internet.
Naysayers.
But it was more of like, let's talk about both Bruce as old Gotham money and what that means. Let's talk about race and class in a city like Gotham. Let's use Lucius Fox as something of a foil for that, who can kind of call Bruce on what is his kind of reckless privilege. And then let's just make it, let us make it like just a racist parable. Like, this person hates brown people. Now, Warner Brothers would not let us just do this person hates brown people, but this person could hate poor people. And most of the poor people also happen to be brown people.
Funny how that works.
And so like I've come to the point both in life and in my career where taking on jobs like this, like freelance gigs, be it, Cape Crusader, which is the sort of height of a freelance gig, or even comic book stuff. It's like, if we can't make a thing that says a thing, then I don't know what we're doing anymore. And I don't think, I'm not doing it for the money. Not that the money's bad, but I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because it'll be fun. Like, I want to write it. You want me to write a Darth Vader? I'm going to write a Darth Vader. See what that's all about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write a Mace Windu because that seems cool, but it's got to be about a thing. And so that got to be the thing that this Cape Crusader was about sort of Bruce being confronted with what it means to A, deal with the supernatural, but B, deal with, class, the noblesse oblige and class dynamics and what that means to him, and then, let's bring Papa Midnight in. Let's bring Lucius in. Let's bring like black people into Batman in a real way. And it was a blast. Like, Ed was really cool to write for. Like, he had great notes. Getting notes from Bruce Timm on a Batman script was ridiculous, as it just scratching myself and pinching myself all this. It's really happening. He would give notes. I would send him the script, he would print out the script, and then he would write his notes in the margin in like a red magic marker, and like half of the time there'd be sketches in the margin as well of like, it should feel like this, and this is the courtroom scene, and this is this. Like, this is just original Bruce Timm sketches on my script. And I have the original script. No, but I printed out the PDF that had them on it, so I pretended it's an original script. But that's the like, not that I didn't need the money at the time, but the money is not what I will remember. I'll remember getting to talk to Bruce Timm and Ed Brubaker about Batman.
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah, speaking of the class issues with Bruce Wayne and Gotham City, we Mike and I just recently did an episode on Absolute Batman, and I was so refreshed by the Bruce Wayne in that, where he's not just a rich guy, and it kind of takes away from the like, hey, I get to go beat up poor people and then send them to my hospital and charge them, like with a lot of the things in the zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it now, that I can't not think about, just because I'm an American. It was very nice to kind of have that take away that upper class aspect. And yeah, speaking to your episode on Cape Crusader, I really did enjoy that. Like, you're making them think about it, and it's not just something that we're not going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that genre, as I've experienced it for most of my life, has not always been about something, but the great genre storytelling has. Even though we might have forgotten over time that Star Wars was a Vietnam parable, that the Empire was America, and Star Trek is just nothing but social commentary. It's baked into Star Wars. The Terminator, it's all there. Like the Road Warrior, it's all there. Like all of that stuff that we love, especially from the 70s and the 80s into the 90s. These were like real filmmakers who wanted to say something about the world they saw around them. And the world around them was fucked up in a few different ways. And so that level of fucked upness would permeate into the stuff that we loved. And to then get to dip my toes in this world that I loved as a kid, it feels irresponsible to not carry on that tradition of like, what is it? Sure, this is silly, but does it have to be silly? Like, does it have to be empty? Like, it could still just be fun, but like, let's make these. It's not a Twinkie. There's actually, it's a steak.
Steaks are fun, yeah.
The protein, but like, it's still good for you, but it tastes great.
You mentioned Star Trek, and I just want to make sure I clarify that you were an intern on Deep Space Nine, I believe.
Yeah. I was a college intern between my junior and senior years. I spent my summer in Los Angeles. I went to St. John's University in Queens, spent 8 weeks in LA, working first on a sitcom that is mostly forgotten called Brooklyn Bridge. And then that was like 3 weeks on that show. And then I spent like 5 or 6 weeks first on Next Gen. But Next Generation was like season 6 or 7 of Next Generation. And they were like a well-oiled machine. Like, they knew exactly what they were doing. They had no issues. They had like, it was not to say boring, because it's never boring, but they were like, you should go over to DS9. They're just starting. They just shot a pilot. They're figuring out what the first season is. There's a lot more drama happening over there.
Right. It's a completely kind of different perspective on the whole Starfleet and Federation aspect of things. A lot of things you're mentioning about like class tiers and, kind of the discord between different classes and different races, especially, is more at the forefront in Deep Space Nine, I feel. Did working on that show for however long you did, kind of work and observe on that show, did that inform a lot of your sensibilities as a writer by any chance?
It did, mostly because, I mean, I was a huge Star Trek fan, so I came to it as a person who already bought in. Like, I'd have been in Starfleet if they'd let me enroll. But getting to see professionals do the job, is always instructive and is always illuminating, and is always like, oh, that's how that's done. Oh, this is what it means to break story. This is what we're looking for. This is how structure operates in TV. I mean, I'd known some of it just from like, I worked before. When I graduated from college, I went to work for a magazine called Starlog Magazine, which was, all about like science fiction and fantasy and TV and movies, but they did a lot of interviews with writers and craftspeople. And so I was able to absorb some of, the under the hood commentary that way. But when I was in Star Trek, I was like 18 years old, like 19 years old, and there was no internet. So there was no no repository of information you could just get your hands on. So the ability to sit in a room or various rooms with people who were doing this and had been doing this for decades was invaluable. It was just invaluable. Like, I couldn't point to like a specific objective thing that I was like, that is my Star Trek. That I pulled this particular, club from the caddy from Star Trek. But it was more the idea that, and I don't think I had understood it as a viewer, but that Star Trek is always about the time that Star Trek is made in. Like in the 60s, Star Trek was about, race, income inequality, warmongering. By the time you got to the 80s, like especially the movies, it's like, all right, conservation.
The whales.
We're doing like just fucking whole ass movie talking about our reckless endangerment of species on Earth. And then by the time you get to Next Generation, like every episode was trying to find a way to deal with something that was reflected in the world that they were making Next Gen and DS9 in. Deep Space Nine is somewhat unique in that it was the first show created after Gene Roddenberry passed. And so it did not have baked into it that requirement of utopia. Next Generation is like, Earth has got it figured out. Earth is cool. Earth is paradise. There's no need for money. There's no need for whatever. It's like, it is a socialist, mostly communist, but somewhat like Greco-Roman idealistic view of what humanity could be. DS9 was like, people are still dirty and greedy and conflicted and confused, and they're still driven by passions and urges, and people do not always play well together, and we're building a show that stays put and doesn't travel, and so trouble is coming to us. Right. Like it was such a different paradigm for what Star Trek could be. It was the beginning of grown up Star Trek. Not that I don't love Next Gen, but like DS9 is what Star Trek wanted to be when it grew up. And then Battlestar Galactica is what Star Trek wanted to be when it went to grad school. And like did the right drugs and like broken by the wrong girls.
No, that is true. Like it's because most of the Star Trek is about the exploration. It's like we're going where no man has gone before, and then Deep Space Nine is like we're here where nobody comes to, or
like we're here right next to the Lincoln Tunnel, and we're hoping that cars will come through and break down.
Yep.
And like, hey, it was like Taxi or Cheers. Like, who's gonna come to our door today? Oh, Ferengi are coming through. Oh, Cardassians are coming through. Oh, the Founders are coming through. What do they want? They want war.
Very socially relevant. I mean,
it's funny you were talking about, in the 60s, it was like X, Y, and Z. And I was like, that's today. That's right now, unfortunately. Yeah. How does that hit for you? I've been kind of just I've been listening to a lot of my parents' music, and they grew up in the 50s and 60s, and just like I'm like, why are these songs still relevant? And then how does that hit for you? Like why are these things where like we should have learned the lesson now? We've had these lessons for decades.
I mean, what is it? All of this has happened before, and all of this will happen again. Like things are cyclical. They always have been. They always will be. The end of a century tends to be rosy and optimistic and flush with cash and promise and lessons learned. And the beginning of a century tends to be chaos, tends to be stock market crashes, tends to be prohibition, tends to be political unrest. The middle of a century is like wars are starting to happen. Like World War I, it's like, 1919 and 1923.
Yeah.
Like,
century ago, yeah.
The stock market crash was, what is that, 29?
29.
And so like you get the jazz age and then you get that. And so I feel as if buckling up seems to be the only really sane thing to do. It's like, we know it's going to be a bumpy road. History has proven to us that these roads are bumpy in this way. One can wish that there was a little bit more optimism to it, that everything didn't seem like we're measuring time in such like large markers. It's like, oh man, 3 more years of this at least. All right, okay, all right, buckle up. And so that stuff always informs the media and the culture around it, and not to say that it's a good trade-off, but like you don't get rap unless you're in the 80s and the 70s. Mm-hmm. You don't get punk unless you get Thatcher's England. You don't get Jimi Hendrix unless you get the 60s. You don't get jazz unless it's, Reconstruction and the end of, the beginning of Jim Crow. Like the sadly flowers grow in shit. And so we're
Yeah,
like,
that's the quote right there.
we're like, all right, so I wish we didn't have to have so much shit, but, flowers. But it is the one somewhat silver lining, is that at some point we will look back on times like this and remember, it's like, oh, there was some great art made now, and great art made by people who feel disenfranchised by the world that surrounds them, and that is the one thing that keeps me wanting to keep creating, knowing that, like, all right, it's going to be hard and it's going to suck, but like, what's the crucible with which I can use to burn off the excess and turn what might be a silly story into something relevant. Time is the fire in which we burn, and this particular time is burning pretty hot. So,
well, I know hindsight, of course, is 2020, and you just mentioned too the idea that we sometimes don't appreciate the expressions that take shape in the now until we're perhaps even decades, ahead of it. But is there anything in this particular moment right now that you are kind of looking at and saying, like, that's going to be something significant, that's going to be an artistic expression that's going to stand out amongst others a couple years from now or decades from now?
I mean, it does not pass unnoticed that, like, 2025 was the year of, like, Bad Bunny and Sinners, and like, and in this particular place, in this particular time, for the most popular music on the planet to be reggaeton, and for the most lauded movie of the year to be a movie about, 1932 Mississippi, about
Sinners was so dope.
Like, it is, art is reactive in a way to the world around it, but like great art also gets to be prescriptive. And so, will we see another Sinners? I don't know. Sinners was greenlit before we got into our current, cultural and political gridlock. But like, it was born at the time it needed to be born. You probably needed Barack Obama to get Disney to unleash money for Black Panther, and then for that movie to come out, during a Trump presidency, like the bell curve of it is never forgotten. But I think that those two things, those two kind of clarion examples of, like, in this world, this is what's popular right now. And there will always be people who want to make that stuff, and then an audience that wants to embrace that stuff. And so I'm hoping that those lessons are not forgotten as we push forward into an uncharted territory filled with whatever it's going to be filled with.
Horrors. Filled with monsters and horrors.
Yeah.
On a lighter note, you did mention the Black Panther. You wrote for Eyes of Wakanda.
Yeah.
How was that experience for you? And then when you are, like they get you in for a couple episodes or one episode, how much do you like hang around? Like you're like, hey, like, do you get to be there for any, like, the recording, the voice acting or anything like that, or like, can you insert yourself into like different things, or how much do you even want to do that?
Well, that one was a job. That one was a, like, I was on that show for like 6 months.
Okay.
And that was one of like 3 or 4 pandemic gigs that I had. And so the experience of that was very much like exactly like this experience, where I'm staring into my screen, talking to people in boxes, making up stuff and figuring out what the show was supposed to be. Like, you start with great ideas, and then you start drilling down and you start discovering characters and themes and plots, and should this be an anthology? Should this be a narrative that we're making a 5 or 6 episode show? When do things begin to clarify and congeal into what we know it's going to be? I've never been in a more never been in a blacker room than that. All of the writers were of color. The showrunner was a person of color. Proximity Media produced it. And so we had the aegis of Ryan kind of hanging over our head, and then the license that bought us, because Ryan is is to Wakanda what, you know, James Gunn is to Metropolis at this point. Like, you know, he's the keeper of the flame, you know. So having Ryan be able to kind of swing for us and help us sell some ideas that were, you know, a little out there. It's like, hey, can we do an Iron Fist? It's like, I don't know if we can do an Iron Fist. Well, let's see if we can do an Iron Fist. Like, Ryan thinks an Iron Fist is fun. Great. You know, it was that story was almost Wenwu from Shang-Chi. Like we wanted to do a Boxer Rebellion story. We wanted to do a sort of China story.
Right.
And initially it was, you know, can we get out of Shanghai? Can our Wakandan spy extricate himself from Shanghai while the Boxer Rebellion is kicking off? And oh yeah, you know, the 10 rings are here. And what happens when, like, oh, is an earthquake coming? It's like, no, it's it's the Mandarin is coming. Wow. But like time and taste and you know, the Crucible went to work, and it turned out that we instead wanted to be in Wakanda. Instead, we wanted to take one episode of like globetrotting and like, you know what does Wakanda look like now? What does Wakanda look like in the 15th century? How far ahead of the rest of the world was it? And so then that's what kind of inverted it. That's what turned it into like a James Bond mission. That's what turned it into like he's out in the world, he's doing a thing, running, jumping, hopping in his Aston Martin, driving home, mission accomplished. Oh, actually, no, you fucked up in the world, and now
brought home just a little bit of baggage.
And that just got to be more fun. You know, like that suddenly was, oh, what if this is Axel Foley as a Wakandan spy? You know, what if it's the guy who's talented but too confident? You know. And
oh my gosh. Now revisiting that episode in my mind, I'm like, it is Axel. Like I can absolutely see the parallel now.
Yeah, there's definitely the banana in the tailpipe.
Yeah.
It was like Axel Foley meets like Will Smith. It was like, you know, what's that level of like comedy, but also capability plus
cockiness.
Yeah. That's what kind of made it fun. And it's like, all right, this will be our comedy episode. If we have such a thing as a comedy episode, it'll be this. And that was a blast. I mean, it was so much fun to do. But I was not, like, so much of my career, and this is just a function of how TV has evolved in the way we make it, is that by the time that show, it took 4 years to make that show, from us being in the writer's room to them like finishing touches, releasing it into the world. I had already moved on to like 2 or 3 or 4 other jobs after that. So my ability to be present in recording studios, and, you know, I was able to see some early cuts and some storyboards of stuff, you know, that Todd Harris, the showrunner, would share with me. But that's just because he was cool. You know, he was so proud of it. It's like, dude, you got to see this. Like, you got to see this.
Like, yeah, I do.
Like, oh man, this is dope. You got to watch this. But I, you know, because they weren't paying me any longer, like they were not then beholden to me to be involved with anything. You know, I think I'd already by that point. What was I doing at that point?
Masters of the Universe by you? Oh no, that was probably before.
That was before, because they wanted me to come back for season 2, write a season 2 episode of Masters, but I couldn't because I was in Wakanda. But yeah, I think it was Picard. That's what it was. Picard came after that. And then I was also working simultaneously on the Captain America Black Panther game, the 1943, the Rise of Hydra thing. Like it was Wakanda during the day, and then like World War II Paris, occupied Paris at night.
I mean, I guess there's worse places to be.
There's worse ways to spend a day while the world outside is on fire. You know, Black Panther punching Nazis. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that sentence.
More of that.
Not a bad thing in there.
More of that, less of everything else. Like,
you know.
I had a question about Milestone, because I believe DC, they're going through kind of a revitalization of Icon, and Static Shock, I believe, is getting a return to the comics for the first time in a long time. And I know that you worked on Static Shock for quite a few issues, actually. And I was curious as to, if the call were to be made, would you take up the chance to revisit any of the Milestone characters?
I do have I have like a sense of unfinished business with Virgil Hawkins. I got to write 2 issues of Static before it was canceled as part of the New 52. It was canceled quickly. It went 8 issues. I wrote the last 2 of them, and like the first of those 2 was finishing off an old story, and the second of those 2 was setting up how the stories would go after that. And it was like, I just want to do Buffy. Like, I want to have Virgil and a couple of friends, and I want to have like the guidance counselor at school who like calls him on the fact that he keeps showing up for school bruised and battered and like misses classes but still has great grades, and like, hey man, is everything okay at home? Do we need to call the police? Like, are you being abused in the house? Because if I see a kid who shows up with black eyes and broken limbs and all of that stuff, then I'm going to call the authorities. And so then Virgil has to come clean and say that it's not that, but I'm this. And then you have this sort of crime fighting unit who both get to help him function as a person, but then help him do his job out in the world. And I was like, all right, cool. Clean slate, ready to bounce. Let's tell teenage superhero stories. And then it went away. So like, there's a part of me that does kind of, want to dip my toes back in that river again. But I'm also incredibly mindful of the fact that like, you can't walk in the same river twice. And so I don't know if I'm the guy that I was, 15 years ago when they asked me to write Static. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the kind of Static that I would write now. If my inclination is to write an older Virgil, or as opposed to like the beginning of his journey, like part of me really likes writing the end of a journey. Like I am a sucker for like the last ride story. The like strapping on. It's the old man going up into his attic, opening up the fucking steamer trunk and pulling out the 6-shooters and strapping them on one last time, one more ride, one last heist, whatever that is. Like that is my shit. And so what is that version of a story for Virgil Hawkins? Like, what is the thing that brings him out of whatever time he's in to light up the sky one more time? That I think I'd like to do. I don't know if I want to do like, I don't know if she likes me. Am I going to do my homework? Oh no! Voice cracking Virgil is not, I think, the version that I want to do.
Honestly, I would be down for Old Man Static.
Yeah,
I would be down for that.
Like
your tale of that.
Who does that kid grow into? Who does he become on the other side of being a young man with power in a place that doesn't know what to do with a young man with power? It's the old man Logan stuff like that.
Yeah.
That it's Unforgiven, but with Virgil Hawkins is kind of the thing that I'd be interested in.
I'm sold. Like, like if you want to just like go ahead and do some fanfic in your spare time, like I will absolutely read it. That sounds so dope. Like, let's go.
Yeah. I don't know. Every now and again, I'll pitch something to DC, and I'll be like, "Hey, man, what about this?" And I'm excited about it, and it for whatever reason dies on the vine in the process. So it's like, hey, at some point, the wheel will turn and come around one more time, and be like, "Hey, man, what about this?" But until that moment, it'll just be like wistful musings on a podcast.
Yeah. Well, I just saw the news, and I was kind of interested, especially when I knew I was going to be on here with you. I wanted to pick your brain about it just because I am a fan of Static Shock and Icon ever since even like the revitalization in the Young Justice show. They were kind of prominent characters there, and I was like, oh, I would love to see these characters back again.
I miss Young Justice. that show is so good. So like in the James Gunnification of kind of like superhero everything, or even Marvel, to say like taking taking the B characters and taking like the smaller characters who are kind of like throwaway add-ons to things, sidekicks and just like random villain of the weeks, or even like Spot in the Spider-Man, in the Spider-Verse movies. Is there anybody that you kind of like have your eye on, where it's like, man, if I could just get what's her name with Magpie, like if I could just get like my hands on something. Is there anyone like that you kind of have an angle on, and you don't have to spoil anything if you know what it is, but is there anyone you're interested in that's like not your mainstream characters? And it doesn't have to be Marvel or DC, like anything.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to not grind down so deeply as to be like, Crazy Quilt. I got a Crazy Quilt story.
Yes.
Condiment King is my guy. Just let me live. That tends to not be where my eye turns. I remember having an idea for Alfred that I really, really liked. That never got any purchase. I've got this Lara L story I think I want to tell at some point, and there's definitely a Jonah Hex thing that's brewing in my head that started brewing during the pandemic. That I think, like, I don't know nothing from what they're planning for an absolute version of Jonah Hex, but like I got a pitch.
That could be dope. That could be dope. I mean, I am loving the Absolute universe. I haven't been this excited about comic books in a while, and I gotta give credit to those guys that are there. They're just doing wonderful things. And now I would absolutely read Absolute Jonah Hex. Like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking big swings, and I think that for so long, and sometimes for good reason. Canon is what canon is. And when things work, you tend to not want to make them not work for shits and giggles. But I think reinvention is necessary. Reinterpretation is necessary for longevity to take hold, and to just be the same thing for 100 years, give or take, with minor variations, is not going to do anybody any good in the long run. So like big ass swings are really the only answer. So like, is this going to be what it's going to be forever? Who knows? Mm-hmm. But it's like an incredibly good breath of fresh air to like, oh, but what if Batman could be this? What if Wonder Woman could also be this? Does it invalidate what it means to be Batman? No. But does it follow all of the rules that have been established for Batman? Not even close. It's what you need to be a thing. It's the I guess the ship of Theseus argument in comic book form, which is if you replace, I mean, not that I need to tell you guys what the ship of Theseus argument.
I mean, obviously not.
But, the idea being like if you have a wooden ship and you replace one plank at a time over 100 years, at the end of that process, do you still have the same ship you started with? Is it still recognizably that ship, or is it a completely different thing, but does it still retain the essence of what it was before?
The Millennium Falcon.
The Millennium Falcon. It's White Vision, right?
Yeah. I hope they don't call the show that.
I hope it was a discussion.
Yeah.
Because I would like it to have been White Vision for a good long while.
Working title, White
Vision. TBD.
All right, Mark. We generally don't try to keep you for a whole hour. And we're coming up a little past our 45 here. Mike, did you have any more questions?
Honestly, I just wanted to say this was a tremendous pleasure to be able to share this screen time with you and be able to pick your brain a little bit, because honestly, I've been a fan for many years now. I wasn't kidding earlier when I said you were 50% of the inspiration for Max and I doing a Batman podcast ourselves. I would listen to your commentary tracks with Kevin on the Burton films. We've actually turned Alfred being the worst butler ever into a running gag on our podcast.
I mean, he's just awful in the movie.
Other car, sir. The other car, sir.
Like, do you even buttle? Do you buttle?
Why are you bringing this woman down to the cave?
She does not have clearance. She should not be down here. Oh, she's blonde. Fine.
But even in those more jovial days, like I appreciated like your insight, and like I said, you have a great chemistry with Kevin that really balances out the whole dynamic so well that it's a joy to always listen to you guys converse about movies, literature, geek things in general, and thank you for that.
My pleasure. It has been the great surprise of the last like 15 years that this A, became a part of my life, and then B, remains a part of my life. You know, like I will do it for as long as Kevin wants to do it, and I'm always surprised that he still wants to do it. Like every now and again, I expect the call. It's like, you know what, man? I think we're gonna hang up the cowl. You know, I think we're gonna be done. I'm busy doing this. You're busy doing that. Maybe it's time to just, you know, put the mic to rest. He has yet to call me and say that. And so it's always a hoot when we just get to fucking hang out and nerd out. That's our DNA. It's what we're made of.
Max and I are kind of at that point right now. It's like we got to come up with a schedule for doing episodes.
and you know, it's always, you know, because like when you have day jobs, also, you know, it's just like not, you know, it's never conducive. It's like, oh, well, let's get together today. No, 10 things happen. I've got kids. Like, you know, it's always whatever. But no, you're absolutely my inspiration to, you know, like giving podcasting a try, and I've always felt that your insight has been so intelligent, and I like 98% of the time I agree with pretty much everything you've got to say. And when you come up with like I don't know, your eye for things is such an interesting, like I don't know, you know, like it's an insight into the way you think, but I have no idea, I have no understanding of it, and so it's always refreshing to me. I was like, oh yeah, like that is that, you know, like, so. Thank you for being you. Is there anything you wanted to plug, anything you're doing right now, and where can people find you?
People can find me on Threads and Blue Sky and Instagram at Marc Bernardin. I've left that other place for good. Yeah, nobody needs that.
Good.
And I think what do I have on deck next is the Rogue One. Marvel is doing a series of one-shots to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Rogue One, which I could not believe it's been 10 years since Rogue One came out.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, like, K2 is my favorite droid in all of Star Wars. And
dude, I just 10 years. Don't know how that happened.
Diego Luna looks just the same. Like
but I wrote a one-shot about Saw Gerrera. Which I think comes out in July. That I don't know if it has a specific date yet, but I know July. And they dropped the cover and they announced the solicitation text. So like I am not talking out of school at all, which is good. That is the next thing coming out that somebody could find on the stands or in the world. And in the meantime, I am actively working on God of War, the live action show. So that will swallow up pretty much the rest of this year, as it swallowed up the entirety of last year. I have no idea when that show is coming out. I have no idea when anyone will see any more from it than that still that they released last week. But it's going to be dope. It's going to be dope. We are sparing no expense. It is the John Hammond of TV shows.
Excellent. That's what I like. No, that's dope. Awesome. Mark, thank you so much. It has been a profound pleasure, and I hope that Kevin never ever makes that call where it's time to hang up the cowl. And if that day should come, I hope you guys go up to the trunk and get the 6 guns out for one last ride.
Or if he needs some people to ride along with you in the pod.
Yeah. Like I'm happy to ride in the sidecar.
No, I appreciate it, fellas. This was a good way to spend an hour.
Thank you so much. This has been another 3 Geeks conversation. Check out Marc Bernardin. Watch for the Saw Gerrera Rogue One shot coming out in July, possibly. Everyone's waiting on God of War, so you'll be able to see Marc and his work in a lot of places, and hopefully more and more to come. This has been awesome. Thank you so much, and recycle your droids.